All right. Welcome, everybody. I think we are going to get going. My name is Michael Waterstone. I am the dean here at Loyola Law School. We have a great conversation for you today with some alumni and friends on the issue of sports and the law and a lot of other issues around that. Welcome to our Dean Centennial Speaker Series. This is in recognition of our centennial anniversary that we're creating a space for ourselves is really a key and a hub for these conversations. It was great to see so many of you at our Centennial Day last week, which was incredibly successful. So as always, thank you for taking the time and space to feel connected to our community. So without further ado, let me introduce our stellar group of panelists today. First, we have Joe Longo, class of 1990. Joe is approaching his third decade as an MLB agent. He's represented 24 first-round picks, including the highest-paid high school catcher, Tyler Soderstrom of the A's, in the modern era of the MLB draft this past June. His client roster includes all-stars Aaron Nola of the Phillies, Jeff McNeil of the Mets, Mitch Moreland of the Padres, and the 2018 MVP Christian Yelich of the Milwaukee Brewers. We're hoping today that Joe is going to announce that Christian is signed with the Angels, but we'll just have to see how that goes. Joe is also a partner at Glaser, Weil, Fink, Howard, Axon, and Shapiro, with an emphasis on sports, estate planning, and asset protection. And as many of our students in the audience know, Joe is also one of the most popular professors at Loyola Law School. Next, we have Bob Myers, who graduated in 2003 from the evening program. Bob is the president of basketball operations and the general manager of the Golden State Warriors. He's in his 9th season as the GM of the Golden State Warriors and 5th with the additional title of president of basketball operations. He has assembled a roster that won 3 NBA titles in 2015, 2017, and 2018, and made 5 consecutive appearances in the NBA Finals. And for that, he earned the NBA Executive of the Year award in both 2014-15 and 16-17. Amongst other accomplishments during his tenure, the Warriors retained a lot of their top talent, starters like Stephen Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson. He acquired the 2015 NBA Finals MVP, Andre Iguodala, in a trade in 2013, signed Kevin Durant in 2017, and DeMarcus Cousins in 2018. Before joining the Warriors, Bob spent the previous 5 years at Wasserman Media Group in Los Angeles. Before that, he had served as a vice president of SFX Sports, where he represented numerous NBA players. And I think Bob was really one of the first agents to make the transition into the GM role, although that's become more common. Bob was also a member of the UCLA basketball team that captured the 1995 NCAA championship. So Bob is truly responsible for one of the most exciting sports moments of my life. I was a senior at that point celebrating in Westwood. So thank you, Bob. Next, we have Amy Siegel, class of 2005. Amy is the managing partner of O'Melveny & Myers Century City office, which is really the center of the firm's really famed entertainment and media practice. Amy herself has been recognized by Variety and The Hollywood Reporter as among the leading entertainment and media lawyers in the country. She represents sports organizations as well as motion picture studios, TV networks, distribution and production companies in all business and legal aspects related to the acquisition, financing, and management of media-related assets. She has broad experience advising both U.S. and international clients on the creation of strategic alliances, project financing, and mergers and acquisitions. In addition to her practice, Amy also devotes significant time to pro bono work and serves on the Century City's Office Diversity Committee, as well as helping us with our Entertainment Fellows program. So Amy, thank you for all that you do. Wonderful to have you here. And last on the playbook, but first in your hearts, we've got Coach Stan Johnson. As of March 20th, 2020, Coach is our LMU head basketball coach and bringing a new sense of energy and optimism to that program. Coach Stan coached 5 seasons at Marquette University, where he helped lead the Golden Eagles to NCAA tournament trip in 2016, 2017. He has a long coaching resume. I'm not going to go through all of it, but he spent 2 seasons before that at Arizona State, as well as numerous other top programs. As a player, Coach Johnson was a 3-year letterman at Southern Utah University. Coach, welcome to LMU. It is wonderful to have you here. And as I always remind Coach, I've got 4 years of eligibility left. Can't move very fast or jump very high, but I've got 5 fouls that I'm willing to give you whenever you want it. My first question is, how did your legal background help prepare you for a career in sports?
I'm happy to start. I thank you first of all for inviting me to participate and speak to everybody today. I'm really excited to talk with all of you. And I thought your intro was actually a really good start to this question, because we obviously all have very different careers in sports, and the law has led us to different angles within the sports industry. So I'll speak personally for myself. The legal background really for me was just a foundation. It was just a really like stable foundation to build on, because I think when you are a good lawyer, you can really solve any kind of problem, and it's problem solving that students are tackling today in all their classes. But I really wanted to be a good lawyer when I got out of law school. That was my goal. I didn't specifically want to be in sports or in a specific area of sports. I wanted to be a really good lawyer first and foremost. And so I think that training that you get in law school and then in your first several years outside of law school is so critically important, to just build a foundation of what does it mean to be a good lawyer, to solve problems, how do you tackle them, what are the sort of the basics that you need to know about the law. And then once you have that, I just think there's so many different areas you can go. My practice is on the corporate side of the law. I don't represent any talent like some of the others here, but I focus more on the corporate side. And so for me, the foundation of the law was more in general, broad corporate transactions, which really didn't need to relate to sports in any way for that foundation. And then layering on the industry expertise later was the sort of the building blocks and the way it worked for me. And I think it's pretty universal for anybody to just build that foundation.
So Joe, let me turn to you. The question was, how did your legal background help prepare you for a career in sports? Because you've had a broad legal background and you've practiced both inside the sports space, but also outside of it.
As I tell my guys, long before I was in the business, lawyers dominated the player representation side. And I think, while you don't necessarily need a law degree, I think 90% of most legitimate agents have a law degree. And the reason is because you grasp the concepts better on the contracts quicker. You grasp the collective bargaining issues quicker. When there's a lot of times what we do is we solve problems, whether that's, a term in negotiations or whether that's something to do with collective bargaining. You're trying to solve problems, and law school seems to train you to think as a problem solver. And I just think lawyers have a good background, certainly on the player representation side.
Cool. Thank you, Joe. Bob, to you, because you probably had a certain vision of what you were hoping for when you came to law school. I know you came as an evening student and you were working in sports both before and during law school.
Yeah, look, I think I missed what I wish I would have received, which probably a lot of the law students listening or watching may not love to hear, but I think the training that Amy got, and probably Joe as well, I didn't get. I was an evening student. I had a job. I was an agent. Much like Joe, I appreciated the need for a law degree. My mentor was a guy named Arn Tellem, who also started, I don't think it was O'Mel, but was at a major law firm before he broke off and started his agency, but always respected the legal component of the job. But for me, I went to law school while I was working and left law school and went right back to work, armed with a law degree, but not armed with the knowledge that Joe and Amy have as far as navigating the law. But I would say this, like Amy, for me, it was a template. It was a foundational piece to my career. A good anecdote is we had a player one time, a guy named Jermaine O'Neal, who was charged with, there was a brawl in the NBA that if you watched the basketball, there was a big brawl at Detroit at one point in time where some players went up into the stands and some fans came down into the court, and it's kind of a huge melee. Some players were suspended for the whole season. The point of the story is we represented a player named Jermaine O'Neal, and I am not, was not, probably could never be any type of criminal attorney or prosecutor or defense attorney. But with my rudimentary legal knowledge, my client or my player, Jermaine O'Neal, looked at me to digest what the outside counsel, the specialist, was telling him. So it's not that I specialize in any of that, but your law degree gives you an ability to process information legally, even if it's not an area of expertise. So that's my short version of saying whatever you leave and whatever you do in law school, just the legal training and the legal mind can be highly valuable just to connect dots, even if you're not a specialist, because so much of law is now specialized.
Thanks, Bob. Coach, turning to you, I guess the twist on the question is one of the conversations we have a lot at our law school is about how ultimately we're a service profession, right? We serve our clients. And you are someone that has, now worked at the highest levels of college basketball. In what ways do you interact with lawyers, either for the university or outside? And can you talk to us about what those interactions are like?
Well, I mean, the number one thing that comes to mind, I mean, if a lawyer shows up, if you're in regards to, let's not talk about, guys that have a chance to maybe go be NBA players. And, sometimes you're dealing with agents who are lawyers. And if you have a kid good enough, you deal with them on that side. But, some things that, at the university level that we deal with commonly, one is, obviously the safety and the education of the student athlete as it pertains to safety. Understanding the role of the university and the athletic department and the coaches in keeping the players safe. And in football, a lot of times that's overheating. In basketball, football, or any other sport, that could be concussions. In terms of gender equity in Title IX, making sure, for example, I've got a lot of things that I want to get done here, being new and changing how our program looks. Well, I'm out fundraising along with the university to do those things. Well, guess what? The women's team, we've got to make sure they're positioned to have that, so you deal with it in that regard. What's going on in our country now, freedom of speech, trying to understand the proper bounds of, codes of conduct so that our guys, their First Amendment rights are still protected, even though they're kind of under the university blanket. And then, you have, if a lawyer shows up sometimes and you're dealing with scandals, that's, obviously not good. We've seen that over the last couple of years of college basketball with the basketball scandal. But those are kind of 4 different areas that you may interact with, the law or a lawyer.
Thanks for that, Coach. Let me stick with you for a second. So, sports are a huge business, arguably even at the collegiate level. From your vantage point, what do you see as the big either business and or legal issues facing collegiate and I would say professional sports over the next 5 years? And I would say, either here in Los Angeles, which I know is new to you, but also nationally.
Yeah, I think, obviously Bob and Joe would know more from a professional standpoint. I think the thing that's coming down the pipe, it already has for us, is NIL, name, image, and likeness, where for example, our guys could benefit off their jersey being sold in our bookstore, or if a corporation or a company wants to come in and pay them a percentage of the profit for using their name, their image, or their likeness, we're looking at that. And there's already that's been approved to some regard where, that's going to happen. I think the other thing, it's been going on for years, the talk, but at some point over the course of the next 5 years, are they going to allow pay for play? Where different conferences and universities are allowed to pay their players to pay. So I think for us, from a collegiate standpoint, those are the issues that we're kind of staring down over the course of the next 5 years.
Thanks, Coach. Bob, can I ask you the same question? And I guess on the likeness issue, it was your former teammate Ed O'Bannon that brought a key case that on that particular issue.
Yeah, I think college is. Sorry, Stan, but college is going to be a tough one to navigate for a little while. I think lucky to have people like Stan that played and can identify what a player might go through and is not just looked upon as part of the establishment. I think it's good to have leaders in place that can understand both sides. And I think that's important, especially, for Stan coming from some pretty high profile colleges and successful in the tournament, understanding the money that's made. But it's very imperfect. It's an interesting, the next 5 years of college sports is going to be very different than I think it's ever been. And everybody's going to have a different opinion on what it's supposed to look like, but it's going to be different and probably overdue, in my opinion. Just the fairness of I saw a lot of players at UCLA that could have done very well, but didn't make money in the NBA. And there's this assumption that a lot of these players are going to school to graduate. That's a myth. I mean, and it's not me saying what they should or shouldn't do, but that's a very idealistic position to say, you're getting an education, what are you complaining about? A lot of these players, their mind is on the next level. I mean, Joe knows more than I do. I mean, as an agent, you could see it. Some of these guys don't need any type of guarantee in the draft. They're leaving no matter what. Their goals are to play professional sports, not to get a college degree. And who am I to say what's right or wrong on that front? But as far as pros, I mean, there's always a legal component to what we do, but it doesn't have amateurism creeping into it. So it's a clear path, Michael, to what we legally negotiate. I mean, obviously, I'm negotiating contracts. Been on Joe's side, been on this side. You build an arena. There's a ton of legal. I've learned more about how you interact with a city than anything in the last few years. San Francisco is just in this COVID environment. What we've had to do to just get our players to practice out here, it's fascinating. There's legal issues that are going to come up around testing. There's legal issues about if we let fans into our arena and somebody gets COVID, what's our liability there? I think the only state that's passed some type of protective law, I believe, might be Ohio. I'm not positive, where you're somewhat exempt from liability on that level. But you better believe that in regards to professional sports and COVID, whether it's the Dodgers, the Angels, the Warriors, any team in California, to open up to fans again, you're not going to do that with that kind of exposure. So why does that matter? That's just one example of a near-term legal issue. There'll probably be another big legal issue in 5 years or 3 years. And it'll always be coming down the pipe in professional sports. And, that's why I think for the people watching, you're getting a law degree, it touches everything. I mean, whether you want to practice traditionally or not, it's probably the most important thing on my resume, is how I would classify it.
For a guy with as many NBA championships as you have, that says a lot. Can I follow up, though, from your vantage point in terms of the NBA as a business? What are the challenges and opportunities in the next 5 years that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, our biggest challenge will be how people consume the product, whether they're watching on their phones. I mean, you're seeing the Nielsen ratings change. Our biggest partner in revenue is television, ESPN and Turner. But how are we capturing audiences now? I mean, the traditional Nielsen ratings are almost pointless. Now they have I forget the exact acronym for it, but it's devices, that are not regular television. So as far as the next few years in our sport, there's the China, right? I mean, that's a third rail topic. How do you do business in China? My brother works at Apple. Apple doesn't have the scrutiny. They do a ton of business in China. So do a lot of technology companies. But when the NBA, such a public-facing company, has issues in China, they aren't going to. You have to address them. So our commissioners had to address those things. Obviously, I know you're going to ask about social justice. There's so many issues that are coming up that law will be at the forefront. But for the next 5 years, the sport is in a good place. I like working in the NBA. I like what we stand for. I like specifically our leadership, our commissioner's leadership. I like how I think, seem to be at the forefront of a lot of the societal issues. And that matters to me. So look, I mean, I could talk for a long time, Michael, on what legal issues are forthcoming, but I think the sport's very stable. It's hard to look past COVID. It's a huge part of what we need in our sport. And Stan, the revenue from college sports is huge to just function, right? And so for us, we'll get through this time, but normalcy and back to making money. And I don't know how it affects Joe's clients. I mean, Joe's going to, talking about how did baseball reach the agreement that they did for 60 games and how acrimonious we may be going through that at some level. What's it going to look like for the NBA next year? I don't know.
Thanks, Bob. Joe, let me go to you.
Yeah, no, Bob and I have a lot of similar concerns in terms of the sport itself. We have a major collective bargaining agreement issues coming up that expire after next season. So the business of baseball, both sides really need to get together on the business of baseball and where it's going. And there's a whole lot of issues that there's a lot of disagreement on right now. It's probably the widest gap between the owners and the players we've had in a couple of decades. So, and a lot of that has to do, like Bob said, is how the consumer, views the product. I just went through an extended negotiation on Yelich's contract with the Brewers, and we went through a lot of the TV revenue, and the TV landscape is completely changed. And, the Brewers, their TV deals up, they're even considering broadcasting their games on Facebook and just, other outlets. There's things are changing in the landscape, and just the regional cable outlet or the regional sort of the network sort of package where, 10 years ago, you just let all the offers come in on the networks. It's changed. It's changed a lot. But I think the game is healthy. I think baseball is very healthy. I like this commissioner a lot. I think he's very progressive. I do think the past commissioners have been have not, adapted with the times as much as this commissioner is. And I think baseball is going to be healthy as ever going forward.
Thanks, Joe. Amy, can I go to you? And I might ask, obviously, real estate is such a huge part of this in our, both in Los Angeles, but also nationally. So to the extent that that's intersected with what you've done, it'd be great to hear about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you shifted because they took all the good answers to your question. There's some really big challenges in the sports industry, but you've each hit, I think, the big ones. We were spending a lot of time talking to clients and working on the fan experience before COVID and how to, we already sort of saw it as a problem that everybody was very comfortable watching sports at home, or more comfortable than they used to be at home, and how do you have that in-stadium experience worthwhile? And now you sort of have to balance that with the new reality of the fact that we don't share space in the way that we used to. And so those are going to bring new legal challenges, but I think like that and like everything else that's been discussed, I'm not trying to be too glass half full today, but I think it brings new opportunities, and it's really why I got into this business, because the legal issues will never go away. Everybody who's on this call will find a job at some point because there are always going to be new legal challenges, but there's also a lot of change in how we consume sports content. And I think if we're not, in physical real estate, I still think we're going to have that. I think it's going to have to be rethought and reshifted. I think there's new opportunities for sponsorship in stadium that maybe weren't there. We're working through some of those challenges now. But I think also just the opportunities of watching at home are growing. Every time there's an Apple and an Amazon and a Netflix, we add to the list, and HBO, and it just keeps growing. I think you guys have touched on basketball, baseball, football. But there's so many other sports that haven't had a home and haven't had an audience to congregate around, or a space to congregate around, that now we have opportunities for. And so I think if you're a super fan of a niche sport, there's going to be a lot more opportunity to find content and to dig deeper and to become a bigger fan together with other fans in a virtual way that is honestly very exciting to me. So maybe not real estate.
Thank you.
Virtual real estate.
Sure. No, I think it's fascinating. I mean, one of the conversations that we have at Loyola is this moment's not going to last forever, but what things about this moment will stick and become a part of both the legal profession and the practice of law moving forward, and how do we build those into the system? I've been thinking about it watching the NBA playoffs with the virtual fans sitting there, and you wonder, like, is that going to be a thing moving forward even after this, or some version of that? So I think it is fascinating.
If we can monetize it, it won't go away.
Right, and there's got to be a way to monetize it, right?
Yeah. But I mean, it's interesting that you picked 5 years, because in my view, 5 years is honestly not long enough to see the impact of COVID. I mean, litigation goes on, unfortunately, even beyond that. And I think a lot of the legal issues are going to still be here in 5 years as a result of this circumstance.
Sure. So I just have a couple more questions, then we're going to open it up to the Q&A. Bob, you commented on this before, and let me just throw it out to anyone in the group. We've certainly seen sports playing a larger role in social justice movements, particularly around racial justice. And this is obviously not new, but we're certainly seeing it more pronounced at the moment. I guess I would invite any of you to share any kind of thoughts or observations or comments either on the future trajectory of that or the role of sports now in that dialogue.
Well, from the company side of, like in the endorsement context or the commercial side, and Joe probably could speak to the athlete's view of it. But I just think with these social justice issues, it's just become increasingly important to see the athlete's full self, with social media and so much about, as you said, Stan, like mixing the politics with the sport. It's more about the person. It's more about their values. And when a brand, so a client, like a consumer product, wants to align with an athlete or a team or sponsorship or endorsement, it's always been important that their values align. That's always been, in theory, important. And I just think it's become increasingly more important and more at the forefront, to where, from a legal perspective, you really have to protect that brand. And I'm on the athlete side as well. I mean, if they're no longer aligned, it really destroys the whole purpose of the sponsorship or the endorsement. And so it's just become very, very important for the lawyers on both sides to protect their clients in that space. It's become commercially important to make sure. So I think there's social reasons, and I'm with you, Stan. I think they can and should mix, and I think the uncomfortable conversations are happening now more. And as a result, I just think brands, at least I can speak from that perspective, are really paying attention to it and making sure that it's the right partnership.
There's so many things to say on this topic that we probably don't have time for, but like Amy said, and Stan, I mean, to label an athlete and entertainer prior to labeling them a human being is ignorant and on the face of it. So I commend you, Stan, for not standing up and leaving the. Maybe it was a high-level donor. You had to just.
Hey, Bob, I did say that's the last time I'm going to be.
I mean,
any time with that person, regardless of what they give.
Yeah, and the good news is taking that little story is, Michael, I mean, so much to say, so much work to do. I'm trying to educate myself just like everybody else is. I'm lucky to work in an environment where I'm the minority, and I say I'm lucky for that because otherwise I grew up pretty much middle-class white and pretty unaware. I'm learning more unaware each day of kind of how life works. Our commissioner recommended a really good book called Caste, which I recommend to everybody listening to this or watching this. It's tremendous. It kind of reshapes racism into casteism, and is really powerful. I'll give you one line from it that kind of I can't get out of my head. they gave a high school essay to contest to some kids in the United States, I think in Ohio, and asked them what should be Hitler's proper punishment. And one 16-year-old female said, put him in black skin and make him live in America. And it's like, holy shit. And you're kind of like the what we thought we know. And I talked about the third rail of race, like this notion of, well, we don't talk about race at our company, or I don't get into that. That hasn't really worked for society. I mean, we're finding that out more clearly. Like the non-discussion, Michael, the avoidance strategy has failed. Not that it was ever a strategy, but at least we're beyond that. At least we're beyond that. By no means are we there. And but the fact that you asked the question is good. The fact that we answered it, the fact that we all have a thought on it, that's a start.
Thank you for that, Bob. Joe, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear Bob and Stan and Amy talk about it. I learned a long time ago when I first got into the business, you're supporting these individuals and their opinions. You're their lawyer, okay? And you need to understand opinions that are maybe different from your own, or different from some, like Bob said, some beliefs that you may have grown up with. But now, all these years later, I love the discourse that's going on. I love the personalities that are coming out. I love the opinions that are out there, because I just think it's better for the consumer. Why does everybody have to have the same beliefs? I think it's better for the sport. I think it's better for the game. And I think ownership should encourage more of this. I'm glad to hear Bob talk about the support that they have for it. And I actually think it's good. And I think, and up until this point, ownership's afraid of offending the consumer, right? You want to play Switzerland because then you don't get people boycott, or you don't get people. We're moving into a new age now. That you can't concern yourself with losing customers, and same with the brands too. You can't concern yourself so much with losing customers with this political discourse that's going on. I think we're moving into a new era, and you got to embrace it.
Well, thank you all for that.
You'll lose them if you don't have the discourse. Like we're flipping it on its head.
Yeah.
Thank you all. I want to grab a couple. We got a bunch of questions coming in, so I want to grab a couple of them. So I'll throw two out, and anyone can jump on them. One is that we're seeing product sponsors on soccer jerseys, and some hints of this in the NBA, Western Union on the Nuggets. Do we think more commercial signage or logos are expected, or are we going to see that? There's I guess, slightly related question directed to Bob, but I think anybody could talk about it. How are teams going to seek to capitalize on developments in sports gambling? And what, do we see that as a threat and opportunity? What does that look like? So let me put those out there, and anyone can respond to either or both.
Well, I mean, a huge part of the NFL is fantasy football, and most people, whether you think you're gambling or not, when you play fantasy football, I don't do it because I kind of, my job is to play fantasy basketball. The difference is I get fired if we suck. But gambling's huge. It's coming. Nobody's stopping it. So my opinion on it I guess it's not really relevant. It's coming, and it'll be monetized, like Amy says, and people will make money. We'll make some money. Sponsors will make companies. I don't know if DraftKings or FanDuel wins out, or one of them buys the other. I'm not smart enough to know that one, but it's already happening. I mean, I think you saw, I forget what arena in DC, they're taking bets at the windows now. I'm not sure if somebody else knows more about that than I do. I think it's coming to certain states in Europe. I don't know how fluent we are in business over there. If Joe or Amy's seen how prevalent gambling is in sports in Europe, it's just automatic. It's like buying a hot dog. So it's coming. What does it mean? Who will make the money? What cut of it will the league get? That's all going to be negotiated. But it's capitalism. And I think the boundaries to stopping it are coming down.
Yeah. The in addition to what Bob said, if you look under the hood of ratings, when these fantasy leagues started, they know that, and I know this is true in baseball because I've seen under the hood, gamblers make up a big percentage of who's watching these games. The fantasy baseball players make up a big percentage of who's watching these games. So yes, the league is currently negotiating, trying to find a role in this gambling that's here to stay. It's not going away.
Amy or Stan, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I would agree.
And if not, we got plenty of questions. Oh yeah, Stan.
I mean, I would agree with both of them. I mean, it's not going away. It's too much money to be made. It's funny about the gamblers. It's all, especially in college, man. It's always after you lose a close game or you didn't cover or whatever, man. Some of the letters that you get, I should read some of you guys those letters. It's incredible. Been called some good names on that.
So another question, which I think is interesting, and the great legal philosopher Yogi Berra once said, predicting the future is hard because it hasn't happened yet. But let me ask you, esports, right, which are obviously kind of a massive thing that are coming, how is that going to change the landscape of, collegiate or pro sports? And, what are the legal and or business issues that are attendant with that? Because it's coming.
Yeah, from a collegiate side, I don't know how it changes it for us. I mean, I think you're seeing a lot more universities that are starting to invest in it. When my last year at Marquette, they had started a team there. I think you're going to see that more and more, across the university level, collegiate level. So I think more people are going to add to that. Why? Because there's a lot of money there to be made, off those games. So now, I mean, for us, the guy that's playing the video game is not going to take away from what we're doing in terms of talent. But I think for universities, and it's another, revenue source.
Yeah, I mean, it's a potential new revenue source for everybody. And I think what we've seen until now are really early investors that are just wanting to get in early and not really know how it's going to work out and not really know how it's going to be monetized and all of the issues that will surface. But in any new disruptive business or new business, you've got these new entrants that are, your venture capitalist sort of mentality wanting to get in early. And I think we saw a lot of that, both with athletes and teams and just, financial investors in general, just wanting to try something new and get in early. And then we're sort of entering into the phase now where we've got to solve the problems and figure out how to make it work and to structure it in a way that is going to make sense long term. So it's a lot to happen in that space in the coming years. Definitely don't have a crystal ball on it, but there's enough people in it now early to watch and see what happens.
Joe, were you going to comment or?
I also think that I'm amazed at the esports space because every time I go to the Sports Lawyers Association convention, it's the most popular panel in the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I see baseball GMs. I haven't seen Bob in those meetings yet. Baseball GMs and team presidents sitting in those meetings, trying to learn things from those meetings, and trying to grasp business from the esports meetings, because you're right, Michael. It's growing fast.
I mean, we have. I mean, the leagues are trying to monetize it. NBA 2K, for example. We have an esports team that we own and operate here, Golden Guardians, and we're what Amy said. I think a lot of the neophyte investors are trying to figure it out. I mean, all that you really, and like I said, Amy's probably more experienced in it. I mean, all you really know now is the companies that put on the events and make the games are killing it. They're like Riot Game. They're crushing it with how much money they're making. But does that mean you can be a part of that? And again, I'd almost call upon a 22-year-old law student to educate me on the infatuation with esports, because you're talking to the wrong human being on watching somebody else play a game. I don't even like video games, which probably makes me crazy in this generation. But I'm in a very small minority of people. I mean, even adults are now playing video games at a higher level, I suppose. But then you take it a step further and say, I'm going to pay and monetize somebody to watch them play. But for a different generation, that's considered entertaining, bottom line. Like somebody that's elite at playing a game, well, instead of being elite at playing what I consider a traditional game, they value that experience as much as I might value watching Michael Jordan. They value whoever the best performer at the video game is, because they're experiencing that through the video game, through the actor that is being controlled.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You mentioned Riot Games. I was visiting with an alum there and walking around and getting a tour. And I'm not a video game person at all. But from a business perspective, I left just blown away in terms of the amount of capital they have, the luxury they have in terms of time frame that they're able to give projects. Their tolerance for failure is off the charts. They're trying a bunch of things and seeing what works. And you just left feeling like, wow, this is so well resourced and they're so thoughtful about what they're doing. It really blew me away. Let me shift gears. We got an interesting COVID-related question about how sustainable is return to play without fans, or even with reduced max attendance, when college and almost all pro sports still are reliant on ticket sales and gate revenue.
What was the question, Mike? How are you going to navigate that? Or how sustainable?
Yeah, how sustainable is it to be returning to play if teams at either the pro level or the college level may have to model that they're not bringing in significant ticket revenue anytime soon?
Yeah, I mean, you can tack on restaurants to that, everything. Go ahead, Joe.
No, I'm sure Bob gets the budgets on his desk, and this is how players get paid, revenues. So we want revenues up just as much as owners. I always tell owners, we're on the same page 90% of the year. It's only when we have to do the contract negotiations we're on the opposite side. And certainly with the attendance down, revenues are down. That means players are going to get less money. It's a problem. And I don't think it's sustainable. It's sustainable in a different way. But I think, financially speaking, if this goes on through another season, I know in our own case, we have a collective bargaining negotiation going on a year from now. It's going to create problems in that negotiation, certainly if we have to do another season with no fans, because that's a big piece, up to 40% in some markets of their revenue.
From a collegiate standpoint, it's not sustainable at all. For men's basketball, obviously football is really important, but the NCAA, they make most of their money off the tournament. So last year we missed out on it, and I think, everyone's trying to put their heads together to make sure we have an NCAA tournament this year, regardless of fans. But that's not something, in terms of each institution, we can't sustain that, because men's basketball and football supports a lot of these other collegiate programs within the university. And if we don't have ticketing sales, and you're going to see people go under, and you're going to see a lot of cutting going on at a lot of different universities.
I agree.
I'm not talking about the small ones. I'm talking about big ones. And you've already seen some of those get hit. So we can't go much longer without figuring this out, or else college athletics as we know it is going to be completely different.
Yeah, we were engaged right at the beginning of this pandemic, I guess in March, by several universities to evaluate their major agreements in terms of force majeure provisions and that sort of thing. Only fun for nerdy lawyers to dig in, but But at the time, you look at the payment schedules of when the universities are getting their sponsorship revenues and their TV revenues. You look at how those payments come in, and that's all negotiated, and that's all been pretty standard in these agreements for a long time. And I remember in March, we were penciling out how long we could go without those payments, where the reserves are and how long it could go. We're past that date now, and I don't think in March we ever imagined it would go this long, but it's real that the timing just doesn't work. And so now it's the time to sort of look at the business model, I think, with a fresh eye instead of how can we squeeze through the end of the year. It's really looking at it more broadly and thinking, how can we make cuts in some cases or find alternative revenue streams.
Great. So we've only got 2 minutes, so I'm just going to close it out quickly. For Amy, Joe, and Bob, there is a request. What was your favorite class in law school? And for Stan, my question is, what can everyone watching this webinar do to support Lions basketball?
I'm going to offend any professor I don't specifically mention, but
you can just say the name of the class.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed Professor Levinson, evidence. I'm not a litigator. I don't ever use evidence. It's completely meaningless in my career, but I just thought it was really fun and interesting, and she's a wonderful professor. So that would be my favorite.
Thanks. Joe, Bob?
Levinson's kind of her own icon, I guess, right? Talk about branding. But she was great. I like who passed away, Larry Lawrence, in contracts. I enjoyed his. It was my favorite class, contracts. What was the second part to the question, Michael?
I forget to.
Oh, that second part was for Coach Stan. So you're good, Bob. You're off the hook.
All right, I'm up.
Yeah.
All right.
Joe?
It was the favorite memory from law school? Question?
Favorite class, favorite memory. Sure, yeah.
The late Dan Lazaroff was teaching sports law in the Showtime 80s era. And the Lakers were in the playoffs, and Jerry West had the time to come speak to our class. By far my favorite memory. Yeah, it was fun.
Wow, you got the logo. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, Coach, bring us home. What can we do to support Lions basketball?
Well, I took this job because I saw, an unlimited potential here in who we could be. And the thing I loved about this place 30 years ago, Bill Kimball, Hank Gathers had an incredible story. And there's a history here. I want to get us back to that and surpass it. We're not back here to just find a way to be 4th, 5th, 6th in the WCC. I want to grow a program. But I've said this, I can't do it by myself, and nothing great can be accomplished alone. So we've got to change the standard, the way we talk about LMU basketball, the way we support it, the way we show up, the way we invest in it. Everybody can do more, and I'd love to get Gersten packed and filled and creating the type of environment that's conducive to winning and recruiting at a high level. So thank you for having me on, and I'll take all the support we can get.
All right, we're all in. We love it. Thank you all so much, Joe, Amy, Bob, Stan. I realize how busy you all are, and we're just incredibly grateful that you gave us an hour to have these really interesting and important conversations. So thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And everyone stay safe and healthy and have a great afternoon. Thanks, everyone.